to start. I feel popular now. All right. So yeah, let's introduce our panelists. We have me and then two panelists today. So tell us your name, your pronouns, and then tell us what kind of RPGs you like to play or design or whatever. And then here's my icebreaker question: what is your favorite RPG setting that you didn't make up yourself? Let's start with Tamara.
Hello, my name is Tamara Curry. I am a longtime GM, mostly. I basically have GM'd everything you can think of, with the exception of the newer games. Some of the newer story time type games, but all the old TSR games, Top Secret, Marvel superheroes. Of course, D&D, now in 3 different editions. I DM'd extensively in 1E, 2nd edition, and now 5th edition. We kind of skipped that whole third 3.5 core thing going. As far as, I've also DM'd a lot of the older games, Traveler, RuneQuest. I mean, pretty much Dragon Quest, you name it, I've pretty much run in it or running it. As far as my favorite world I have my own world that I have been running for 40 years. So that is probably my favorite world. But as far as one that I didn't design, I'm going to have to go with the newer one, the Forgotten Realms. It's very rich, lots of stuff there. You can pull bits and pieces out of it and, localize the player characters, or you can let them roam the whole world. My favorite game, one of my favorite games to run is actually Traveler. Traveler is especially the original edition, the 2D6 game, quick, fast, not a lot of modifiers, and you can go. It's also one of the only systems where you can die in character generation.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Kelly, tell us about yourself.
Kelly Pierce. I've been role-playing off and on for the past over 30 some years. And I have run various different games from original D&D to AD&D. I don't really stay up on any of the more current Dungeons & Dragons stuff, but I've run Teenagers from Outer Space, which is just some fun, goofy stuff. And currently I keep with the World of Darkness because I can do almost anything I want in that system and get away with it all. Storytelling is where I like to be more than anything else. A world that I really enjoyed, which was kind of fun. I don't know if it was something somebody else made up, but it was a game I was in ages ago in Paranoia. We did a game of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and it was quite entertaining. I hadn't seen the movie, but once I did go to see the movie or had it watching it with my family, I was like, oh, I've been to that bar. It was quite funny. My mother was like, you're crazy, right? So yeah, there's definitely, I depend on a lot of other people's worlds more than my own. And it's been kind of entertaining being a player as much as a GM.
That's cool. Yeah. As for me, my name is James Mendez Hodes. I use he, him pronouns. I am a writer and a cultural consultant, working mostly within analog gaming. You might know me from games like 7th Sea or Scion, or I wrote like 4 pages of Monster Hearts. Most of my gaming is in like smaller press and newer, like independently published games like Fate or Powered by the Apocalypse kind of things. And so I do a lot of world building professionally, and then I don't do a lot of world building as a GM. So this is going to be a learning experience for me. But I think my favorite setting for a game that I didn't make up, I'm just looking at my shelf here. What looks good over here? I really like John Harper's settings. So John Harper has a bunch of different games which take place ostensibly in different worlds, like Lady Blackbird, or Blades in the Dark, or Scum and Villainy. Well, Scum and Villainy is somebody else, but a lot of these games, even though they take place in different settings, have characters and setting elements which remain constant. It's not really clear whether they like actually take place in the same world at different times, or they're like slightly varied versions. So there's like a John Harper multiverse, which I really like. And also, a lot of the games are free, which is dope. Um, so yeah, thank you all for being here. I'm excited to be in the presence of so much expertise. Let's get into our discussion. So let's start with kind of a broad question. Tell me, why is world building important to you in the games you play, or in what ways might it not be important to you? That's another option.
It will depend on what I'm doing with my game at the time. If this is the beginning of a campaign, then I consider world building extremely important. If it's a one-off or whatever, I'm not going to impose my cultural gaming on anyone else. We just kind of go off the cuff. And again, or if I'm running something that's not mine. But yes, when I run, every other Friday night and my one Saturday a month game, and in my world, it is, it's very important, and it starts at different levels. And I like to use the ripple effect when I'm world building. I don't need to define something that the players haven't encountered yet.
I kind of go off on the same thing of, I try not to get too specific with the world. I learned that if you make things too structured, sometimes you don't get the flow that you need when your characters, the players decide they want to go to left field. So for me, I like to kind of wing it and at least have a loose idea of where we're going to go or where we're going to be. I can change things up when I need to and keep things going. That's why I run things that are a little more modern day, so that I can keep a world that is a little more noticeable and recognizable to everybody. And then keep it just like that. It keeps my brain from having to overload during a game.
All right. So when we talk about world building, there's a couple of different things that we could refer to. One is this idea that we see in a lot of, say, like older fantasy role playing games, where there's a big setting that is a lot of it gets defined like before the game. So there's something like Greyhawk, Forgotten Realms, Birthright, all those old D&D settings from the past. There's this existing setting, and then it's already kind of fully formed when the players come into it. And then there's other situations in like a more modern game and in like an urban fantasy context, like you were mentioning, Kelly, where you're taking the real world, and then like the active world building is more like drifting it.
Right.
Yeah. So those are a couple of different models that we've got on the table now. So anyone can world build, right? So players can world build, GMs can world build, game writers and designers. So let's talk about what part of world building is particularly relevant to a game master. Why would the game master in particular be doing world building? What are the advantages of that, of adding that to your many thousands of GM responsibilities?
Having a structure, knowing where I'm going to go with things, at least get some kind of a baseline going, so you're not just going off on some weird tangent. That's what I feel. If I have the structure and have at least the idea of where the world's supposed to go, it's okay to veer off of it, but at least if I can keep people flowing with that structure and give them that not all the chaos is there for me. At least get some kind of planning of, what is the scene that you're going to go into and how's it going to look. I don't always put everything on paper. It's always in my head, which is always kind of fun, but.
That's cool. Nice. I like the balance of structure and freedom.
Very similar to that with Kelly, and I do I tend to specialize in the more of the fantasy realm D&D kind of things. Is I like to do that, like I said before, the ripple effect. A lot of times players will start very small. You know, the world to them is the village that they grew up in. Sometimes they all grew up together, sometimes they didn't. It depends. But and I like watching the players learn about the world, and they get to add things as they, you know, they bring their characters through, you know, a lot of their backstories and things like that. And I will take bits and pieces of that and add it to the world on a very permanent basis. And as I said, the world that I've been running on my own is over 40 years old. And because I have a degree in history, it's a lot of the cultures are here, there, and other places. A lot of my long-term players know about this. They know about some of the, and I've created certain things where certain players gain certain minor advantages from their culture. I have a race of barbarians in my world that fight with long sword and short sword, and the short sword is considered an honor blade. If they make the kill on an opponent with the short sword, they gain a 25% experience bonus for that kill. So it gives something cultural. It's not only a cultural advantage, but it's a little bit of a player advantage. And in mechanics, it doesn't work out to that big a deal, but it's fun to have a player try to finagle that and things like that. And then other cultures have other minor things in my world to that effect, and that gives a little bit of flavor. The world originated in 1E, where there was not a lot of differentiation. You know, one cleric was pretty much like another, one fighter was pretty much like another. So the cultural differentiation became important, and that was one of the big things that kind of motivated me to do that kind of extensive world building.
All right. Cool. So another thing that I was thinking about is a lot of times this weekend, both in creative panels for like literature situations, as well as in RPG panels, we've talked a lot about like what's realistic in various different ways. So I wanted to ask, what do you think is the role of realism and consistency, especially in like a speculative fiction situation where, you know, you might have space wizards or something like that? What does realism or consistency mean in this fantastical context we're in? And you can say nothing, I hate it, throw it out. Like that's also
well,
fine.
One of the things it's going to go through also is, you know, one of the things is how far do you want to suspend disbelief? You know, there are certain games where I will literally tell people, get your science out of my fantasy. And there are other games where that's not appropriate. You know, I run a lot of Traveler, and very, very, you know, very science-based, but there is also that fantastic aspect with, you know, psionics and Zodani commandos blinking onto your ship and blinking off, and, you know, that kind of thing. So it's a matter of what level of suspension of disbelief does your world going to entail for you and your players, is what I think that one comes down to for me. Obviously, if you're in a high fantasy setting with magic and, you know, the rules of science are pretty much out the window.
Well, and to go on that, I kind of flashing on, I had a character or a player who decided they wanted to play what we call a null, who disbelieved in anything that was fantastical in the game. If they saw elves that were serving at a restaurant or something, he'd say they were children. If you did a magic trick, he would be like, no, it didn't, no. Or if you had like magical things that might trigger, some of the other players would use that character to go and get past, because anything magical would just not work. And somebody said, oh, I could never have a character like that. I said, yeah, but think about it. That's the challenge. That was the fun of that whole thing, is to have somebody else disbelieve so much that their disbelief could outdo whatever magical thing was happening. So, you know, I mean, it can work both ways. It can be a horrible thing, but I think as a GM, if you can run with it and allow something like that, I think it could get more entertaining too. So yeah, you could go from the opposite end of let's totally disbelieve this and see what the other people can do with it.
That's really interesting. I'm curious about that particular situation. Was this in a World of Darkness game?
It was.
All right, so this is it's a world it for if in case people in the audience aren't familiar, this is like an urban fantasy setting where stuff like vampires and fairies and stuff are real, but most people don't know about them. So so I guess my question is, how did the other players react to this situation? Because I imagine this was the only character who was like this.
It was the only character like this, and the rest of the players were trying to convince him that this was a real thing. And he would look at them and go, you like doing sleight of hand magic tricks. I mean, literally somebody transformed into another critter altogether, and he just like, wow, good trick of the eyes. I mean, the guy doing the character.
The other players really enjoyed that.
Some of them got a little frustrated. Some of them decided to actually utilize the character because, like I said, we were in a situation where there was going to be possible traps. So they sent this null in first to kind of either trigger it or to get past it and use it as a tool. Is what finally ended up happening. Is they used that person as the tool to get through certain parts of the adventure.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, I might have more questions about that later. Either in or outside the panel, because this is a fascinating situation to me.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's see. What's another one that I got here? Oh, how does world building intersect with real world political and social issues, both intentionally and unintentionally? I think that we've both in the like the D&D fantasy context and in the modern context, we've talked about like taking inspiration from like real world culture and so forth. So yeah, what do you see as the intersection between those like real world issues and this fantasy situation?
World of Darkness is perfect for that because a lot of it is about the masquerade keeping, you know, certain things secret. Or on the other hand, so you've got one sect that wants to be secret, you've got another sect that's like, oh no, we want to be out there. So yeah, bringing that idea and how do you work with it. A lot of times I try to keep real political stuff out of it. So like I might change whoever the president is or whoever the hierarchy is in our world, but at the same time you can still have the same struggles because you have all these hierarchies within the world of darkness that you have to work with. Anyway, I mean, yes, you have freedom there, but at the same time, we all know the Camarilla are the puppeteers and do everything, and the Sabbat want to burn down the world. It is a baseline to the whole thing.
Cool.
Mostly in my worlds, try to keep it again away from modern politics, but not necessarily modern political situations. There are times when, you know, even a D&D group, you know, gets powerful enough that, you know, a corrupt government might be an interesting adventure. So, you know, try to keep it away from, you know, the horrors of real life. But there are other, you know, now the more modern the game gets, the more appropriate politics get. Like, and by the time you get up to something like Traveler, politics become incredibly important. The funny thing is the Traveler world that I run was very Firefly before Joss Whedon was born, or close to it. Where we had the Central Imperium, which was very lawful, very strict, very, to some extent, too lawful and too corrupt, easily hidden. And then you had the Outer Rim, which was a little more Wild West, though in my world, it does not have a Western flavor, but it is the same.
Cool. Nice. All right. What else do I got here? Actually, I want to take an audience question. I know I was.
Yeah, we've got a couple of Q&As up.
Yeah, I know I said I was going to wait, but I feel like this fits in well here. So Helen asks, what do you think is the best way to shepherd players towards the best parts of your world without railroading?
That was a panel we did last year, I think, was
Mhm.
players are difficult at times. Sometimes you could, I kind of, as a GM, I kind of call it the carrot and the stick. Um, Sometimes you can lure them over where you want them with a carrot, and other times you just have to put the item in their way and hit them with it like a big stick. So, you know, I used to originally game and things were all laid out and pinned to the map and nailed down, and I got tired of total party kills because players don't read the big Warner Brothers sign that says dragon in this mountain, turn back. Well, your second level, turn back here. Okay, you're all dead.
Yeah, I learned the hard way on that one. I had a great scenario. I had it all mapped out in my head, and everybody else decided they wanted to go a totally different tangent, and it kind of destroyed my world, which was it made me feel really bad. And I'm like, wow, am I a bad GM? But then it was, I learned from it. You gotta, that's why I go more freeform, is because it's all about also getting the characters involved in the game. As a player, I would always be able to see where the GM wanted us to go, and I would help with it. And I do it subconsciously. But, not everybody wants to do that. They want to make their own thing. They want to do their own whatever to make it more fun. So it sometimes is listening to your players and seeing how else to do it. I've said before, one of the games I was running on a regular, I'd actually have one of my players would look at me and go, okay, the guys are bored. You need to give them something to fight. So I had to pull a fight out just out of the blue. But it's listening to them and then seeing, like you said, the carrot or the stick, which way do you want to go? Maybe if the dragon is supposed to be there, maybe there's a pothole that pulls them into something else. I don't know. Sometimes it is. I had one GM, when he got pissed off with us, would just go, fine. You want to know what you see? Sand. What else do you see? More sand. Because we just derailed his whole plot line, and he decided he didn't like us anymore, so he'd throw us in the middle of a desert.
Uh, so he would never just like ask you to do something else, like out of character?
He kind of was he would have tantrums. So because if the guys would decide that they didn't want to do what he wanted, so all of a sudden we find ourselves in a really weird situation. So
Got it.
yeah, it's more of, I think that's also when we were younger. This is when we're in our 20s, when we all think that everything is happy-go-lucky and we want to party and everything else, and don't think about other people. We were just, and I know you're probably like, that's not at all how I am. But when we were younger, it was all about, cons were about playing, drinking and partying. And when you got together to role play, you had a few drinks and you had fun with your friends. You never really thought about everybody else's feelings. Nowadays, you get a little more into, okay, so how's this person feeling about this? Let's see where we can go next.
Cool. Yeah, so one I just throw in my own one that I sometimes use with my players is, hey guys, I made up a location or planet or NPC that I really like. Can we go there this session? And they can say no, but like usually my players are like, yeah, that sounds fun. I'll manufacture an excuse to go there. But yeah, so like talking to people out of character, often very effective.
Well, I like encouraging role playing, and there was a game from LARPing where these two guys walked up to my human character and says, "We dominate you." And I sat there and went, you know what? Can we try role playing? Why do you have to throw this out? Let me try to start the conversation, and basically showed them without using character traits of, this is how you manipulate people and this is how you dominate, not just walk up to me and go, I'm going to dominate you. No, that doesn't work.
Okay. And when when you say dominate, you're referring to a vampire power?
Yes.
Cool.
Mhm.
Just wanted to clarify
Sorry,
that in
yeah.
case anyone in the audience. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, cool. So I guess on the flip side, I feel like so when I started GMing, I was very into my own world building and into my own NPCs and all the stuff that I prepared. Maybe to a fault. I feel like a lot of us may have experienced GMs who are like more focused on their world building than on the player characters and their players' needs. And I had to learn that the hard way by being that GM for a while. So how can we make sure how much is too much, and how can we make sure to leave space for players' contributions?
I think experience is really, I hate to say, is the teacher in that. You can't, you can write this all in books as much as you want, and you could tell people, give yourself some space, maybe write in that 5 minute, this is going to be a kibitzing time or what have you. But honestly, until you learn from your players and from your games what people really like, and we've discussed before, is knowing what characters you have there as people, it's going to be hard. You can't, you just, that's why I like to do things kind of spur of the moment and out of, just out there. But I think Tamara probably has alternate ideas that she can go on instead of having to just keep it on that one path. Maybe that's the thing, is have those alternatives just in case, instead of
Not,
just pushing.
it's not just the alternative, but as a GM, I like to use the phrase for my players: no matter where you go, there you are. Um, and I've learned over the years not to set an adventure in a particular place. If I've created, and a lot of it is revolving around fantasy, or it could even be Traveler, I can open the adventure up in a particular starport or whatever, or, close it down there from the last session. But particularly in the fantasy realm, it's easy. Okay, you're traveling between here and there on whatever business the player characters are on, and you come across a set of ruins. Those ruins haven't looked like they have not been tread upon for many decades, and of course, the naturally curious player characters are going to start exploring the ruins and find the dungeon door, and that was the adventure for the night, and it was always going to be there, no matter where they went. There they are. So that was one of the things I learned very early, was not to pin things. There are certain things pinned to the map. There are certain territories and things that are pinned to the map, and the players generally know about them, or find out about them relatively close to when they're close to there. But I don't generally I don't generally like to run my world building over a player's. Like if a player gives me a really cool backstory, like, okay. And one of the things about having a world that is that as hugely vast as the one that I've created is, okay, so the cities are all delineated, but there's towns and villages dotted all across the map. So maybe you come from a village that fits that background that you wanted, very close to over here. And I don't have to build all of that up for the player character's backstory, but I give them a place on the map that they came from, not just, well, I grew up in a town, or I grew up in a village, or I grew up in a city. So I try not to overrun the players' backgrounds with the background of the world, but rather kind of, mesh them in together.
It seems like with that kind of world building, I remember we talked about this last year on the events rather than places panel. It seems like for that kind of approach, it might be more useful to spend time like working on like NPCs and organizations a lot of the time, rather than like, there's this city, it's really particular to this mountain.
Right, and that's the first 3 seconds, and then the rest of the hour and a half to flesh out that one area is, what is the culture like? What are the political groups like? What are what are the machinations going on there? Are they honest to God politics, or is somebody corrupt? You know, that kind of thing. So, and that all gets laid out before the players really ever step foot on their first adventure, to some extent, maybe not all of it.
Kelly, do you have anything to add?
I structure is so fun to look at from other people's point of view. I personally am just so, I don't have the brain width to put everything down like that. It's a little harder for me, so it's always interesting to hear. And I like the idea of role playing as in more like acting things than doing the, so it is more dependent on the characters than it is, you know, the players that are there, than it is on what is in my head. I might have one or two NPCs that are really the big part of the game, but the rest of it is what else are we going to run into? And I like ganking a lot of stuff from other worlds. So if, you know, we have True Blood is an interesting vampire concept, let's throw that in there. You know, you've got other different, I don't know if I want sparkling vampires, but you know, you never know. There might be a reason for it. I kind of let it flow as it goes.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. I feel like there's certain elements that show up in like almost every campaign world that I end up in. I'll take any excuse to put the Wu-Tang Clan in the game.
And one of the things I wanted to point out is when the cultures are all fleshed out like that, and some of the cities are somewhat fleshed out, and you leave enough wiggle room for cultural adventuring. You know, a smaller independent duchy could be taken over, and that might be something that the characters can meddle with, and it may sometimes even influence the course of full-blown kingdoms in later levels, especially in fantasy games. You know, that's not even already a trope or anything.
Right. Another question from Helen that I wanted to bring in, because I think this is relevant to some of the stuff we've been talking about, especially with World of Darkness, where we got a lot of morally gray or morally like not so good people. What do you do differently if you're building a world for an evil campaign?
I don't know that I've actually done that, but I've played a lot of Sabbat, which they are the evil, I guess, of the vampire world in World of Darkness. And I happened upon that group, and that's what ended up being my thing. And it's interesting. You have to really know what is their goal and what they're doing. So it is interesting to do an evil campaign and try to keep with it. I had GMs that would try to force the evil people into doing what they wanted. And it's like, no, you've got to know what is it about the evil? You know, what are they after? What is their goal? You know, are they there to take over the world? Well, you can't force them into going a different direction. If that is their goal, that's going to be their goal. So I guess you have to put that baseline of what makes it evil.
And how does that interact with the world that you're building?
For my world, I don't do a lot of the evil. I can play an evil character, but I don't know that I do a happy-go-lucky vampire game, which is kind of funny. So I kind of twist it. But in the situations that we've had, there was one situation where we were supposed to destroy somebody, and the GMs kept trying to stop. It was one of the fill-in GMs, so they didn't really have, I guess, a good base of what these characters are like, and tried to stop what I wanted to do. And I'm like, you're not going to do that. It's not going to happen. So because they didn't know the evil that I was playing, they just knew, oh, well, we want to save this poor person whose character is being destroyed right now. And it's like, sorry, they crossed the wrong people. They crossed the Sabbat, they're going to die. It's just the way it is.
Right.
So playing it is easy. I don't know about running it.
Tamara, any thoughts on world building for evil?
I mean, obviously evil exists, both in reality and fantasies. And You know, from a strictly world building and authoring kind of sense, not necessarily dictating what's going to happen, but fleshing out the world, evil has to be there. It has to be uh, it has to be there to create conflict, to create, you know, the bad guys, to create a motive. A lot of player characters are motivated by evil things that have been done to them by evil people at a time or place where they couldn't stop it. And, you know, many a player character was born that that's never going to happen to me or anybody else again while I'm living. So it does have to be there. As far as the fantasy game, you know, games like Traveler don't really have an alignment. They have actions and consequences. You know, if you don't get caught, you can get away with whatever. On the other hand, in a high-tech society, eventually there's going to be a camera or a bot or somebody who's going to catch you. So you will at some point face the consequences for too many actions that some people might find morally reprehensible.
Right.
But in a D&D game, and we have run evil campaigns. The only rule I have in an evil campaign is I try to get the players into some sort of mode where it doesn't just break down into all-out chaos and you know, total player party backstabbing. I try to give evil people a common goal and let them go about attaining that goal by the evil methods or any methods that they want to try. One of the interesting things is in one of the campaigns that was run that way, I played an anti-paladin to a Leviatar, who is a minor goddess of pain and cruelty. But I dressed in her colors, which were ice blue and white. So in this shining ice blue and white armor, I look like a paladin, and I would act like a paladin with a twist. Once rode into a very poor town, threw a bunch of copper on the ground. During the scuffle, I saw this big guy literally pick up this poor washerwoman and throw her to the side, smashing her into the side of a building. So I brought down my morning star on the top of his head. Totally lawful good act at that point.
So was this an NPC you were running as a GM, or?
I was not running as a GM. I was not GMing that one, but this is the kind of things that I try to sponsor as a GM, is to play creatively when you're evil, not just turn into the world's worst murder hobo. Because that's a lot of times that's what evil fantasy games degenerate into.
Mom,
We go into town, murder everybody we can, and leave when we have to.
Got it.
So
cool. Yeah. All right. Finally, this one's from Jeremiah M, and I love this one because when people ask me what I'm into in settings, I'm always like, oh, I really like culture clash. And then like 9 times out of 10, when I actually see culture clash in a game, I'm like, well, this is racist. I hate it now. Yeah. Whose idea was it to ask for this? So how do you create good conflicts within cultures?
Well, that's where I think I want to speak with the World of Darkness. Since a lot of times culture could also be critter, like I talked about the fact of needing fights. So I had actually where werewolves needed to come or sniffed out and found that there was something weird in their area and went to go attack the party. And it was all about, you know, they don't care who you are. If you're in their realm, you're going to die. So it's all about the clash of the different types of critters. Sometimes is a good way to do that culture clash. And sometimes it's even more fun to have a character that might not always like things like that, and then have one of those critters in your game and have to make them work together too. So yeah, you know that there's some angst between them, but then they have to have a common goal. So it's easier, I think, in things like that, because then you don't have to deal with race, you don't have to deal with everything else. You deal with, well, these are werewolves, these are vampires, they don't like each other, so they're going to fight. I think it just makes it easier that way.
I like the especially like that thread of combining reasons for antagonism and reasons for cooperation. Having both of those going on at the same time seems like a good way to create interesting interactions.
In my cultural world, we have, first of all, dozens and dozens of human cultures. On top of that, you have multiple elven cultures and multiple dwarven gnome cultures, and you've got the different races. A long time ago, kind of threw out the racial charts from the original 1E Player's Handbook. Um, there was never the history. Those were kind of based on some of the things that happened in some high fantasy books. They were never part of my world, so I kind of let the racism, when you've got dozens of different human cultures with dozens of different skin pigmentations and eye pigmentations and backgrounds and deities, if you start hating people for those things, you're going to hate everybody. So I think people in a fantasy world will kind of let that go. There are still, that to be said, there's still the kind of playful things you see in the Lord of the Rings between Legolas and Gimli, you know, well, that still only counts as one, you know, that kind of thing. And the elves and dwarves in my world will kind of go back and forth on that. And, you know, well, you know, you killed him at range. That was pretty cowardice. Yes, says you know, kind of thing. It doesn't degenerate into, you know, pointed ears or your skin's the wrong color or that kind of thing. That I think you're right. That smacks a little too close to our world and a little too much about, you know, get your realism out of my fantasy world.
Cool. And then we're getting close to time, but I just want to ask. I wanted to answer one more. This may be. Hopefully, this will be a quick one. Karen Setz asks, "What types of worlds do you like to build?" And I want to, since we've been talking about that a little bit already, I want to specify that a little bit more. Which is, for you, what part of world building is most fun? Like, what part do you like emotionally, like really look forward to? You know, there's so many different tasks making up NPCs, cultures, places, all these things, but which is the moment that like where you really find yourself smiling?
So I like puzzles. So I like putting the pieces out there to figure out what that puzzle is, and having these little, I guess, ways of picking up the pieces. I'm not trying to be specific into one of my own things as part of my plot lines, but there's certain things that represent stuff. So to try to build that together and have that in my format, and then hopefully everybody can get to the end goal of those puzzles and figure them out, is what I like to do.
It's cool.
Some of that's good. I like, my favorite part of the cultural stuff is to grab little interesting bits and pieces and incorporate them. And sometimes my players will help me with this. I had a game, not necessarily recently, but one where one of the player characters played a barbarian who was a lower birth order princess of a tribe, one of the, like a Bedouin tribe, but they had the Ashanti in my world. And but she was a princess and she had run away from home, but she had certain cultural differences, like she could only eat with her right hand, things like that. And, you know, people would hand her things when she already had a piece of food in her right hand. She'd have to put it back on her plate and take the piece of food from them with her right hand because she could only handle food in her right hand. You know, things like that. I like the details. I like making the player characters different. And it was, you know, with the advent of 5e and the fact that everybody can kind of pick slightly different paths and slightly different skills for their character, it's kind of lost a little bit of its importance. But back with the 1E game, it added a lot of flavor. It added a lot of individuality to a character that, you know, as I said before, pretty much 1E was pretty cookie cutter. Every cleric was pretty much like every other cleric. It was all about how you role played them and where your background was and your culture.
something
cool.
that you kind of pinged on it, and I can't remember yes, I do. It's central casting. I used to love using the central casting books as a character, as a player, to figure out what is that history or what is that background. I think I've heard that there's some online things that now do random generated things like that, but I used to love those books, and there was all for everything from fantasy to future to present that you could roll and see. You know, it could be a simple roll of you turned all milk sour when you were born. You know, it was quite entertaining.
All right. Well, we are out of time, but thank you both so much, and thank you to all of our guests for waking up convention early to listen to us. So just finally, before we go, remind us of your name, where we can find you on the internet, and maybe something you're working on right now or something that you want to plug by somebody else real fast. Tamara, let's start with you.
I'm on the internet, mostly Facebook. I am not really a public figure, but a private GM most of the time. But I do have an email address, tcurry623@gmail.com. And if you have any further questions, I will be happy to answer them for you. And one of the things I'm working on right now that I'm really, really enjoying is I have finally begun the adaptation of my very old world to 5e. That world, as I said, was written in 1e, so it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome, thank you. And if you could type your email into the chat, that would be awesome. Kelly.
So Kelly Pierce, I have quite a few hats here at Balticon, and I encourage everybody to go and take a look at the dealer's room. See if there's anything you want to chat with any of the dealers there. They're in the Discord, and we also have something on the main Balticon website with a list of all the dealers that wanted to participate. I also run the charity event, so if you ever have to clean out your house and have some weird geeky stuff that you want to donate to our charity event, we'll have it again next year. This year we didn't want to do it online, but it'll be in person, and you could email bb4k@bisfist.org. You could find me on Facebook. Kelly Shannon is as one word for my name on Facebook. Find me there, message me. We can get connected that way.
Awesome.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of this.
Thanks. And I'm James Mendez Hodes, jamesmendezhodes.com. I'm at Lula Vampiro on Twitter, and my tabletop role-playing game about the Japanese Warring States period, Thousand Arrows, coming out later this summer. Thanks so much for an awesome Balticon, everybody. Yeah, hey, Caitlin. All right, we'll see y'all in Discord.
All right.
See you there.
Bye.